That
All
works.
right, welcome to Where's Your Next, the Vlogcast. Tonight we are privileged to have a guest, and it's been a while since we've been on. So I'm happy to welcome Weston Brandon, who wrote a book, which I just so happen to have, The Overhaul. It's kind of a weird angle there, but um, let's go ahead and I'll give a brief intro about Where's Your Next. So, Where's Your Next? We explore business success, career success, being the best version of yourself, trying to live your best life, really, is what it's all about. And in this crazy world, ever since 2020, things have been a little bit wacko. And so I think I look for stories like Brandon's or Weston Brandon's, where just someone who has able to been pick themselves up, got back in the game and kept going. It's a wonderful thing. So tell us about yourself and welcome to my vlogcast. It's nice to have you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. The common story that anybody will know, or when they look me up or anything, they'll see the widowed at 23 with a NICU baby is kind of that's the headline for anything that I. That's the emotional hook that gets anybody to be like, who is this guy and why should I listen to him? You know.
Hmm.
And happily remarried now, have a couple more kids. Did a huge career change during all that crazy stuff. Have since written a book. You'll probably hear background noise of my kids screaming at some point because it's bedtime, but they don't like
It's okay.
bedtime.
It's all right.
So there's lots of stuff going on, but happy to happy to be here.
Absolutely. So what we're about to do, let me find my, there we go. Share screen. Here we go. All right. And we are sharing. So let's talk about your book. So what you got?
This book is
You can buy
the
it on
preface.
Amazon.
Yeah. So the preface of this book is the story of what happened when I lost my wife. That was so tragic. Just as a context setter for where I'm coming from with the rest of the book. And then the rest of the book is what I learned from climbing out of that hole and forcing success into my life the way that I wanted it to look. Like I said, when I was 23, my wife was diagnosed with what's called an incompetent cervix while she was pregnant at 25 weeks. So basically, what that means is she dilated, but didn't go into labor.
Mm.
Um, so of course, like baby can fall out at that point. So they're like, okay, we need to be on bed rest. We're going to give you some steroids to kick the lung development into gear and just make sure that he's okay once he does end up coming, whenever that is. But you're going to be on bed rest until that happens. So that could have been, 3 months. It could have been a day. Ended up being a week. And he was born at 26 weeks. And then my wife suffered a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot that gets stuck in your lungs
Oh,
after the C-section. And she passed away 2 weeks after he was born. And
oh,
luckily, when it happened, I was with her. It was at home. She just thought she was having a panic attack. But obviously, it was more than that. So she wasn't ever able to catch her breath. And she passed away in my arms as I was holding her, trying to help her to calm down. And that experience obviously just pulls the rug out from under you.
mhm,
Like I had been in the sales profession for multiple years at this point. I had done door to door sales first, and then I had transitioned over to doing more high ticket software sales. I sold mechanical engineering software and industrial 3D printers, and had done very well at it. I had hit their President's Club numbers because at first I did a inside sales kind of position where I was doing a lot of cold calling and finding the sales opportunities and sending those to the account managers over those territories. And I had hit the President's Club numbers for that. We had, got the Hawaii trip and all the, everything that you get with your sales rewards and stuff. And I'd earned a promotion for that where I had earned my own territory to be an account manager over the state of Oklahoma, specifically Oklahoma City area through that job. And so everything was going great. I had the job, had the money, had the family, had all of the things, and life was going exactly the way that I planned it, and that we planned it with my wife.
Hmm.
And she had a great job, and we're like, all right, we're in a good place to start a family, and that's what we decided to do. And then when the rug gets pulled out from under you like that, like, my gosh, that just, like, for me, and I'm sure this is the same for plenty of other professionals, like, my career was a huge piece of my identity, right?
Hmm.
Of who I was. And I took a lot of self-confidence and my self-esteem from my performance in my job and my career. And so when I lose my wife, obviously I'm taking plenty of time off, and I have FMLA leave and stuff. So it wasn't God, it was a few months before I attempted to come back. And when I came back and tried to get back into the routine of doing my sales and hitting my numbers, I couldn't do it. Um,
Mm.
there was something busted in my brain that I used to, at that, like, before this happened, I thrived in the high pressure, high reward, high risk kind of sales world. And that was motivating before that. But then losing my first wife and having this tiny baby and seeing medical bills into the millions of dollars that were being billed to my insurance,
Oh,
um, suddenly possibility was no longer motivating.
and
It
all this
was
at 23.
Yeah, I'm 23 years old when this happens.
How many years ago was that?
So that was in 2019 when that happened.
Wow. That, oh my gosh. That's amazing. My
It was
gosh.
it was heavy. And I was living in Texas too. My wife and I had decided that we wanted to go kind of plan our own routes, and the company that I was working for at the time was Go Engineer, and the people that work there are phenomenal. I have very good relationships with everybody that works there, and they supported me really, really well through a lot of that. Very good people. Um, but yeah, I had moved to Texas because they had a remote office in the Dallas area, and so we're like, let's move out there and and start our own roots out there, kind of do our own thing. And so it was going well until that happened, and then my son, since he's born at 26 weeks, he's in the NICU. He can't go home because he's got to hit certain milestones before he can come home. And those milestones were that he needed to hold his own oxygen without any CPAP assistance. Luckily, when he came out, he didn't need to be intubated. He didn't have to have the breathing tube down his throat like they were expecting. Whatever they had given my wife for the first week that she was on bed rest had got his lungs developed fast enough that he could breathe on his own. He just wasn't to the point that he would remember to breathe. So they had to put the pressure on his nose to kind of remind him to, take a breath consistently. And then, so maintain his own oxygen, maintain his own body temperature, and then eat everything orally and not have to have any extra supplemented through a breathing tube that was poking down his throat or something. So he was in the NICU for a total 2.5 months. My wife passed away 2 weeks into that. So then it was 2 months after my wife passed away that I finally got to bring my son home. And at that point, I was like my parents had flown down there. My wife's parents had been in the area, so I wasn't alone, but you still feel like it.
Hmm.
And so I was like, I need to go where all of the people that want to support me, want to help raise this kid where they are, because I can't do it on my own out here, especially if I'm expected to eventually get back into work, to provide for this kid. So I picked up everything I owned and moved back to Utah and moved back in with my parents into the bedroom that I had when I was in high school. Like, complete start over. And it was when I was
That
there that I
was,
met my
let's see, that's 6 years ago.
yeah. Yep, that was so he was
Oh,
discharged from the NICU June, I think it was like 15th or something, middle of June. And then I moved back to Utah on the 4th of July, actually.
mm,
And then I actually met my second wife in the 1st of August,
mm,
like very early August. And um, that wasn't, I don't want to say it was planned on my part, but I felt there was something in me that was pushing me to at least stay open to another relationship, and that I needed to not be closed off to that should it happen. But I also didn't trust myself to like make logical decisions at the time with everything going on in my,
Hmm.
in my head and in my emotionally and stuff. So
Did you have to
I'm
go to
a
counseling to
oh yeah.
get
Yep.
yourself back together? Okay.
Yep. I got lucky with that too because in our ward, 'cause I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as you
Hmm.
are, right?
Yep.
We're neighbors, and in my
That's how we know
ward
each
at the
other.
time, which is our for anybody that doesn't know, that's like your local congregation kind of thing. And there's a guy in our ward who owned his own. He was a licensed therapist, and he owned his own practice. He partners with like a relative or something to run his own practice, and he specialized in both grief and addiction. And I was like, I need the grief part there, but so he's like, yeah, come, we'll do. He's like, I'll give you like 2 or 3 months for free. Just
Mm,
I
that's
could
an
growing up
amazing
in their
human being
ward.
right there.
He had seen me as a teenager and had been one of my youth leaders at church for a long time. So, he's like, yeah, come
Oh,
a couple
that's
months. And
awesome.
then I paid him after that for a little while to keep going until I kind of felt like I was back to at least my mind was stable again. I felt in control of everything that was going on again. And yeah, it was during that time that I met my second wife, who you guys saw her walk right past here.
She's an
She was
amazing
talking
human being.
with my grandmother. Yes, she is. She's awesome.
Well, I have to tell, I mean, I did not know this story. I knew kind of about it, but I know that you have been to hell and back and overcome. So tell us about what got you to write this and share your story and to be vulnerable. I mean, okay, here's what I think is really amazing. So I respect you. I think you're an incredible human being. It's so neat to me that you've been able to get yourself. So tell us more about where you're at right now and what you're doing and how you're bringing your story to the world and what that means. Because this took a lot of vulnerability to put out there in the world,
Hmm.
and there's a that's hard for a guy to do sometimes, right? I mean, it's to open up and give to others and let people see that side of you. It's a very human thing, and I think that's a remarkable story. I think knowing you, picking yourself up, keeping going, the resiliency factor is an incredible thing. So tell us more about that. I think that's a neat
Okay.
thing. That's a next segue to kind of
Yeah.
go in. Great, and thanks for sharing the backstory because it's very helpful to. And then, what was the journey like from there to get where you are now?
Yeah. Um,
I know that's
yeah. That
all
that
questions.
whole. I
Just
get
talk.
it. No,
Just go wherever you want with that.
that whole backstory is. I mean, that's the preface of the book. It's. I think it's important to understand where I'm coming from when I talk about what I do in the book, because the book isn't. It's not a memoir of just everything that happened
Mhm,
in my life.
mhm.
Like the
It's a
preface is really.
methodology to live your best life.
It's exactly what it is.
Yep.
So God, it was what are we in now? June. In December, I wasn't even considering. It wasn't even a thought in my mind to write a book or to do speaking like I am or do any of this. You know, um, as I mentioned, like I'm a very spiritual guy. I talk to God a lot, and I was actually I was priest quorum advisor in our ward, which is 16 to 18-year-olds for a while. So I was in charge of some of the youth ministry where we're at, and we had a youth activity, and this is probably maybe February, March, sometime last year. Um, and we had got done watching a movie, and myself and a couple of the other leaders were like reminiscing about the times that we had served our missions, and we are just kind of on a spiritual high. And so I was feeling just in little bit more of that spiritual headspace as I was driving back home. And as I was driving, I got this overwhelming feeling that I was God was going to put something upon me or call me or something, ask me to do something that I wasn't spiritually ready to handle yet, and that I needed to get with the program. I needed to put more effort into that portion so that I could sustain the load that was coming, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
It wasn't like, hey, this is gonna really suck. It's just like, in order to accomplish this, you're gonna need to be in a better spot than you're at. It's kind of the feeling that I got. I'm like, okay. And I believed it because before my first wife passed away, I got something similar, but it was like something really hard is coming. And it was just a few weeks before she passed away. I guess you could call it a premonition, something like that. I got a very, very distinct feeling that something rough was coming. And I told her about that at the time. She says, if as long as we're together, we'll be all right. And then we weren't together and I wasn't all right. Yeah. And then I had gotten another one when I was dating my second wife that something rough was coming and something did that was super emotional for her to end up handling. So then I get this third one and I'm like, ah, crap. Like, now what? But it was a little different. It was more like, hey, not necessarily that something difficult's going to happen, like a trial kind of thing. It's more like you need to prepare for something I need you to do. And I had no idea what that meant. And so what I did was came home from that, talked to my wife, my second wife, and I was like, "Hey, remember these other two things? Remember the one I had when we were dating?" She's like, "Yeah, did you get another one?" I'm like, "Kind of. It's a little different." Told her what it was, and so we're like, "All right, let's make sure we're praying together a lot, and we're like studying the Word together a lot." And we're like, "All right, cool," and make a plan, and then didn't really change anything, just kind of stayed in the same routine, you know. And so then for the next like 10 months, this pull was happening. And I was like, I'm supposed to be doing, I don't know what the freak it is. And it was bugging me. I could not figure it out. And I was getting so sick and tired of myself for not self-motivating to do better in that regard at the time that I finally knelt down and prayed. And I was like, God, whatever it is, I suck. I can't motivate myself to get better. So just force me to get with it and just whatever I'm supposed to be doing, just do it now. And then within a week later, had some crazy stuff happen to my family, and through some conversations, this kind of set on me. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to do this." And the only person that I knew that did anything like that was Chad Hymas.
Uh-huh.
And
The
Chad's,
author of your book.
he's local here, and he wrote the foreword to the book. And I had grown up in Rush Valley. It's a little farming town where Chad lives too, and so I'd grown up with near his family, knew his boys. So I text him and I'm like, "Hey, I just feel like I got this prompting, this calling, whatever you want to call it, and that I need to speak. I need to be a speaker. I need to share this, but I have no idea how do you do that? Where do you go? What do you do? What does that even look like?" And so he's like, "Well, I'm in like Milwaukee or something speaking for the next few days. I'll be back, and then you can come over and we can talk about it." I'm like, okay. So we do. I go over to his house and he tells me, he's like, "You need to go join the National Speakers Association. These are some people you need to get to know and jump in, or else you're going to feel like a failure with this. The way that you've described how this is kind of come and set upon you, knowing you're going to feel like a failure if you don't like put everything you got into it." I'm like, "Yeah, you just tell me which direction to run and I'll start sprinting that way." So that's kind of where this came from. And I got connected with the lady that had helped him write his first two books, I think. And so I hired her to coach me through how to write a book and specifically how to structure it so that it was more like an accordion that I could use to structure coaching programs out of and build a whole lot of other things off of the book. So now that the book is out,
Uh-huh.
what I actually, let me reel back. What I actually put into the book, and anybody watching this is probably like, what the hell is the book about? Well, the book is what I did to write the book was I looked back at how I made myself successful again after what felt like losing everything, you know.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, I had remarried, had a couple more kids, and not to say that that's like 100% on me, obviously. But then I had changed careers, complete career swap. I didn't do sales anymore. I went to trade school and got into HVAC school, and I do commercial kitchen service right now. I fix McDonald's ice cream machine, and everybody else's, but that's what I do. And I got really good at it really fast to the point that I was training all the new guys coming on and quickly rose up to making roughly the same amount of money as I was doing the sales before I got the big promotion at sales. But it was a point that I was like, I can comfortably sustain a family off of this. And had about 2 months to like take a breather. I'm like, all right, I can coast with this. I can do this the rest of my life. I'm totally fine with this. And, I'm just going to relax kind of. And then this comes on me and it's like, so what I what I ended up putting in the book was everything that I had learned through climbing out of that, what I did, but then also what I ended up teaching all of the guys that I had to train. Because I trained guys both in the sales world before this happened, and then I also train new technicians when they come in to work with us. And what I learned was that a lot of times for these guys to really grasp whatever the technical training or the practical knowledge that I was trying to convey to them. For example, electrical theory is what we have to do a lot in this HVAC and commercial kitchen service world. Everything's controlled with electricity, so we have to know that pretty well. And it was difficult for some of these guys to grasp some of the concepts and to really learn things and for things to stick if they didn't know themselves, if that makes sense. Like if they were inauthentic with themselves and thus inauthentic with everybody else around them, then they just lied to themselves all the time without realizing it and pretended like they knew things that they didn't. And it was really hard for them to retain knowledge with that kind of stuff going on in their head, you know? So what would initially start as, you know, we're doing 2-3 hour car ride or work truck ride out to a job in, I don't know, Vernal or somewhere. And what would initially start when they'd first start was questions about technical stuff. And I'm explaining refrigeration theory or electrical stuff. But then it would, as I got to know them and hang around them more, those conversations morphed into more like life coaching conversations. And it would be like, hey, you know, we have been around you for a couple of months now, and I have a pretty good idea of how your brain works. And I'm going to make some assumptions about your childhood, and I want you to tell me if I'm right or not, or like your upbringing. And so then I'd, you know, make some what I could see on these guys probably was happening, and I would make an assumption. Like, I assume your relationship with your dad or your mom or whoever was kind of like this, and I assume that your experience in school or with your peers was something like this, or like, you know, just kind of tossing some things out of there, and I was right 95% of the time.
Hmm.
And they're like, how can you tell them? Like, it's, you hang around you enough, and just the way that you behave, I can see it. And I can tell that, like, this particular thing that you're struggling with, I think a big reason why you're struggling with it is because you haven't let go of some of this other deeper stuff in yourself, and it's taken up the space, the mental space that you need to be able to learn this. So then I would like get into stuff like that. And so when I sit down to write this book, I have all of this stuff like in my head, right? Like bouncing
Like
around.
Ohm's law.
Yeah, Ohm's law. Ohm's
It
law
looks
is an
like it's
electrical theory.
connected to electrical. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Ohm's law is a common thing that you learn in electrical school about how different ways to measure electricity and how they relate to each other.
Hmm.
Um, for example, ohms is a unit of measurement to measure resistance, and
Okay.
then amperes or amps is a measurement to measure current or how much electricity is flowing, and then voltage is pressure. And so then I use that as metaphors on how we can and how we measure impact and how big of an effect that we have on other people. And I morph it, and I take it from Ohm's law, and I'm like, we can put this in a really cool analogy or metaphor for human performance and how
Hmm.
we and leadership, like how we affect other people. And I flip it and I turn it into the law of impact, and I
Cool.
teach
How do you
that.
connect that to how you? Okay, so like let's bring this home to the listeners for real quick. So
Sure.
last 5 years, COVID, crazy situation, right? All this
Uh-huh.
crazy stuff going on in our world, right? Chaos, wild, and I mean, to the point where we have to be resilient and keep ourselves uh, going, even
Hmm.
when life hits you with a gut punch. So bring that home. How does the law of impact help you be resilient
That is a great question, because in
without
the
giving away the
corporate
full book?
America that I have experienced, impact is something that has been heavily hit on, like, for leaders. Like, they want to have healthy impact on other people, but how they do that and how they can measure that is difficult. So I use Ohm's law as just a way to think about it, of like, if impact is what we're looking for. How can we create impact, right? I actually have a copy of my book. I'm going to show the formula here.
Bring that home too to how you got out of your rut those 6 years ago, and you
Ooh,
bounced back with
that's a
your
good question.
resiliency.
Right?
Because I think the one thing that I think is such a compelling piece about your story, and this is why I love having you on, and just hearing the authenticity, it's so neat that you're able to bounce back from that whole. I mean, so many men could just fold right there. You
Hmm.
losing your wife, you got a new baby, you're all by yourself. I mean, wow. Talk about having to overcome a life gut punch to such a degree that, I mean, and using that impact to make a difference. Talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll see if we can show on the camera this right
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah. It's a little
This
backwards,
formula
but
I come up with. This is basically Ohm's law, but for human performance and impact on other people. And impact is equals effort times purpose over opposition. Um,
awesome.
where the Ohm's law is even simpler. Like before I even bring in the purpose, if the amount of impact that we want to have on our family, whether that's just how much money we make so we can impact our family, or we want to have impact on the people that we manage, or something like that, or we want to have impact on our relationships. Obviously, it's going to take effort to do that, but it's going to be directly opposed by the opposition that we receive in that. And that could be internal opposition within ourselves, or it could even be external opposition from other people, other forces. Tons of stuff is working against us. And that
Society
just
and
completely takes away
people
from
with
the effectiveness.
anxiety, people having, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many different things. Like one thing I saw the other day, well, over time, there's been a direct correlation to the impact on mental health in the last 6 years and people needing to overcome the resilient or the resistance, as you call it, to
Mhm.
that success, which again, mental health is a big part of it. And it's kind of like an internal thing within us, the fight or flight syndrome. You know, you could have run away, but you ran right into the fire. I mean,
Yeah,
you
that's
know, which I think is amazing part about your story. But keep going. I don't want to interrupt you, but that was what
no,
I
you're
thought of.
you're you're good. So when I was talking about like your effort is directly negatively impacted by whatever opposition that you're facing, right? The way that you can increase the effectiveness of your effort is directly tying it to your sole purpose. Like, why are you doing? Like
Why
Simon
are you
Sinek's
living?
famous for your why, right? Like, why?
Yep.
Start with your why. What's your why, kind of thing. And I'll be honest, when I had heard that even before, the experience of losing my wife, the find your why, start with why. At that time, that wasn't good enough for me. Like find your why. It didn't resonate with me because my why was in my hand. I mean, yeah, that gave me tons of motivation, right? My son that I can hold in my hands is all the motivation I need to get back to work. But how do I make it even more effective? One of the really cool things that we learn just in HVAC school or electrical or whatever is how electricity is induced and how magnetism is directly related to that, and how generators work and all that. But where I'm going to tie this in just a second, an electromagnetic field draws things to it that are in harmony with that electromagnetic influence, right? That's
Hmm.
just a magnet. That's so what we learn is the only way that a magnetic field is produced, is generated, is when a charged particle is in motion. Only when it's in motion. If a particle is not in motion, there is no magnetic field of influence. It's not happening. So the whole message of the book is clarity comes through committed movement. If you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to do and you want to draw things to you that are going to help you figure that out, you have to be in motion. You can't be sitting on your hands, right?
Yep. This
So,
is why I pulled up this quote. You're never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream.
oh my gosh, I love that.
That's from C.S. Lewis, one of the most amazing Christians ever. But I'll,
Love that guy.
yeah, keep going. Sorry.
So
I
as
kept
I
thinking of that as you were talking. So,
you get so I learned this in school, like from a practical perspective. Like I have to understand how electricity is generated, and so then I can work with it, right? Let me turn on one of these lights. You realize my lighting is going. Ooh, I don't know if it'll work. That's a little better. There we go. So I learned this in school. Like this is how a magnetic field is generated. And then we learn how magnetic fields interact with each other, and how they influence behavior and how they induce electricity, which is what actually accomplishes something. Electricity is just energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started to learn, and I started doing studies more recently when I was reading the book about how people interact with each other. And I came across this really cool study from the Heart Math Institute about how, and we've known this for decades, that brain waves are a thing. Our minds produce an electromagnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very similar thing. But your heart produces an electromagnetic field that is thousands of times stronger than the one in your mind.
Mm.
Problem that most people have, though, is they don't ever get their mind and their heart to believe the same thing. Because believe it or not, there are neurons in your heart
Mm.
that have a lot to do with memory and emotion. And there's a two-way communication happening between the neurons in your heart and the neurons in your mind. It's not just one from your brain to your heart telling your heart what to do, which is blowing my mind when I'm learning this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, they're picking up on this electromagnetic field that your body's producing several feet away. They can pick up and they can measure the frequency of this electromagnetic field and see how stable it is or how disproportionate it is or whatever. So they started doing more studies like, well, when somebody's own person, you could call it your field of influence or your sphere of influence, whatever, there's actually something emanating from you. And when they're measuring that coming off a person, when it's the most stable and strongest is when people are feeling authenticity, when they're exhibiting authenticity and gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Which are huge. And especially if you can get those together. I don't think you can have gratitude without authenticity, particularly. But if somebody's in a mindset of authenticity and gratitude, the field of influence coming off of them is as strong as it could possibly be. Whereas on the other hand, feelings of, say, like doubt and fear and discontent make that frequency that's coming off of them so uneven and so uh, disproportionate and kind of scattered a little bit. It's not steady. It's not a steady frequency coming off the person. And so now that I've spent all this time in school learning about electricity and actually how electromagnetic fields interact with each other, I'm starting, my wheels are spinning. I'm like, is it any wonder that people who are constantly in a position of doubt and fear always seem to attract to themselves the things that are in harmony with those feelings, the very things that they're afraid of? But then the people who actually really, really believe that they're going to get what they want and they, manifest it, I guess, or whatever you want to say, and they really put themselves as if they've pretty much already made it,
Mm-hmm.
those people usually almost always make it. I mean, it takes some time, but they pretty much always get it, you
That's
know?
awesome.
So
Yeah.
as I'm going through this, I'm trying to study and model like the most successful people that I can find. How do they think? What do they believe? What's their
What's their
mantra? Like,
system, right?
what are they doing to do that? That's not like, you know, what do I do in the morning and how many emails do I send kind of a system. It's more like, no, like what's your belief system? Like,
Mm.
what are you actually doing? And so I
Mm-hmm.
started listening to some podcasts of these people and I, some articles that they'd read, and there was this common theme
Mm-hmm.
of this, basically, some people would call it like law of attraction, like the Secret by Rhonda Byrne, I think was huge in like 90s or something like that.
Yep.
And so there was some of that, but I didn't really like a whole lot of that particular with the Secret stuff, because there was a lot of like new ageism and kind of just universe, not too much. I'm very
Sure.
spiritual. I believe in God, so I was like,
Right.
how is God in this? So
Yeah.
as I'm researching this and I'm figuring out, I'm like, dude, this is how God has created the universe. He's created these patterns and how things work. Like physics is, God made physics in that's what I believe. These are his laws that he made. And I think that he's given us just a little piece of the ability to create our own reality.
That's awesome.
And as I study the scriptures, I get into the Bible, specifically, I think in James 1, right? It
Mm-hmm.
says, ask, believing that you'll receive, nothing wavering, and it shall be given unto you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that like, that's just faith, right? So as I'm studying this and I'm like figuring out, this is how people literally influence people around them and draw to them, I guess you could say, the raw materials that they need to create whatever that is that they're creating. That's just the scientific measurement of exercising faith,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And in that way, you're also that you're building your positive mindset, like you're talking about.
Oh yeah, and I
pushes,
believe
kind of drives you into your success world. Can I ask you a question on drive? So
yeah,
tell me
absolutely.
about. It looks like drive, the acronym, is one of the big. Uh, well, yeah, it's like the theme of your book there.
It's
I'm
everything is
looking at
built
it.
around drive.
Talk
Yeah.
about it. So talk about what that stands for in each of the points and why they're important.
So I'm going to
Because
back up just a
you did
little
a
bit
great
to
job
give some
about
context.
talking about, how that, you know, mindset of impact pulls that, so
Hmm.
tie that together a little bit, because that's a like half your book right there. Drive.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that because if we're talking about like, uh, we want to have, if we basically want to metaphorically become a magnet for good, we want to become a magnet for the reality that we're trying to build, right? And everything draw to us everything we need to do that. Well, electromagnetic fields and their frequency, they have layers, and that's how we draw them. In fact,
Hmm.
I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna draw a little diagram on a whiteboard here for anybody who's watching. Can we see that? Maybe. Might
Go
have to
for it.
turn
Let's
my
see how this works.
I had to turn my computer a little bit. All these magnets that my daughter like. So, if anybody in school ever saw a diagram of a magnet, you've got basically north and south poles,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It's, I don't know if that's backwards for you
It's
or it's a
backwards,
little.
but it's okay. We get the point. The
All right,
ends on
but
the back, on the top, and the
yeah.
S on
So
the bottom.
north and
Yep.
south pole, right? And then
Hmm.
you have energy leaving the north pole and coming around and coming back into the south pole, and this is kind of just what a magnetic field looks like. And we've diagrammed this. We've known this for years. So I'm like, if I want to know like what is that sphere of influence? What am I actually doing to cause that? If the message of my book is that clarity comes through committed movement, if I'm trying to find clarity in what I'm supposed to do, what does committed movement look like? That's what drive is. Each of these layers is drive. And what drive stands
Cool.
for is discover, resolve, invest, visualize, and elevate. And you have to learn those one at a time. You have to initially do them one at a time. But really, it's a system. Which like this, you can't
Hmm.
see it now, but a magnetic field isn't all of the layers of a magnetic field influence the other layers. It's not just one stacks on top of another. No, like one layer of the magnetic field gets knocked out of alignment or something, all of the other ones are affected. So going back to the guys that I was training when in either of my careers, if they hadn't discovered some things about themselves and specifically why they think the way that they do,
Hmm.
and they weren't authentic with themselves,
Hmm.
and they hadn't resolved those things that needed to resolve, then it was really hard for them to understand anything, really.
Right. It's those first two
So,
points, right?
yep.
So within yourself, you have to discover why you believe as you do
Hmm.
and what it is that you want out of your life to be
Yep.
happy. In other words, you have to kind of visualize the end game before the
Hmm.
beginning and go
Yep.
for it, right? So that's part of discovery, is figuring out what drives you, why it drives you, what gets you out of bed every day in order to keep facing this thing called life.
Hmm.
Um,
Where I start in that discovery
yeah,
phase is there's so many people that
talk about that. Yeah, that's
I
powerful. I like that
if I'm
concept.
speaking to a group of kids graduating high school or maybe incoming freshmen at a university or something like this, um, a lot of them are asking the question, "What do I do now?" Or other men that were in my position that have the rug pulled out from under them, are like, "What do I do now?" That's how do I figure that out? And I use a metaphor. I teach a metaphor that I say, "Hey, there's a trumpet off in the distance somewhere calling to you.
Hmm.
Whether you can hear it or not, there is a purpose for you out there. That if you're able to figure that out, you will like cool stuff will happen. Like success is that direction, wherever that direction is for you."
Hmm.
The problem is so many of us can't even pick up on what direction that trumpet's calling us from.
Hmm.
And why can't we pick up on that? Well, because we've got our earplugs in, we've got so much stuff right here in front of our face that's clouding our
There's
vision,
so
clouding
much
our ears.
noise in the world,
There's so much noise. And
and you have
we
to
were
get
talking
the
about mental health
clarity of
stuff, right?
what's going to help make you happy. Keep
There's
going.
so much
Yep.
noise in our own minds. And
Hmm.
we have to figure out like where is that noise coming from and why are there so many things that are out of sync?
Sometimes it's self.
Right?
inflicted. Other
Yeah.
times it's environmental inflicted.
Well, what I talk about in the book is a lot of times, and actually, one of my favorite books that talks about this at a much deeper level is actually called Wild at Heart by John Eldridge, and
Mm,
he refers to.
I've been starting to read that.
Oh,
I'm
I'm so
halfway.
dude.
I'm like 3/4 of the way done.
That
That
is one
book
of
is
my
incredible.
favorite
It's
books.
amazing. Is that what
So
drove you to go to the retreat that you went to?
yeah, well, okay. So the reason I went there is I mentioned I talked to Chad Hymas like months ago,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And had
yes.
him write the foreword of the book. Anyway, so he told one of the guys he told me I needed to get to know is his name's Clint Pulver, and Clint has
Okay.
become a great mentor to me. And one of the things that Clint told me, he tells me about Wild at Heart. He says, you need to read this book and you need to go to this retreat. It's called Warrior Heart, which is
Yes.
run, they do them all over the place. There's one up here in Utah I just went to a few weeks ago. He says, you need to do these. It'll help you, clarify a lot of things. And
Cool.
really what that is like figuring out where you left your heart behind and reconnecting with God at a deeper level. And love that book for like the self-discovery kind of stuff. And in my book, I talk about a mask. I realized that both in myself before I, well, I can't even really pinpoint a one specific place where I figured out I was doing this, but it's probably on my mission actually, when I was serving a mission, that I realized I had put on a mask. And I can see that in so many other men that they put on a mask that's inauthentic, but it's a version of themselves that they would rather be than what's actually what they are.
Hmm.
And they're usually that comes because they're trying to protect themselves and they're trying to save themselves some pain from some wounds that they received when they were younger. A lot of times those
Yep.
wounds come from father figures or parental figures, or it could come from peers, and there's probably multiple wounds that we receive in our growing up, but
And
those stay
society
with
tries to
us for,
suppress it within us.
yeah,
The
they
the
stay
the
with us
heart
for
that was within us,
forever.
and then there's that layer of, it's like an avalanche has been a weight on you that you have to free yourself from, is basically the premise of that Wild at Heart book. Um,
Yes.
and it's a pretty amazing concept. So the discovery piece that you're talking about ties greatly into that. So figure out who you are, why you want to do it, and what's your purpose. The next part is this. I don't want to. So tell me more about resolve once you've moved past that stage of discovery.
So, I mean, it's one thing to
I'm just
discover
trying
that
to
you
make
have
sure we get
something.
the drive in before the time ends of the
Oh,
hour.
you're good. What is the time? Do you have an hour or what's the
Yeah, about an hour. So we have about 13
okay,
more minutes. So just want to make sure
cool.
we keep up with that.
Yeah, no worries. So I mean, it's one thing to discover that you have all of these things about yourself, but you actually have to resolve those things that are keeping you from progressing towards your goals, or that are disharmonious with the reality that you're trying to build, right? And because I hear so often that it's super,
The
super
stuff that's
easy to just
keeping you
play the.
from to realizing the discovery within yourself is the resolve,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I've met so many people that have discovered a lot of their wounds, but then they just hang on to the wounds and make it part of who they are, and they don't try to cauterize them and heal them. They're just like it
Hmm.
just becomes like this blame
You
game,
say
like
that
all
in
of
your,
this
I'm going to
crap.
quote from your book: resolve is the bridge between awareness and transformation, the force that moves you from recognition to action, from struggle to strength, from pain to purpose.
Yes, because
What
so
a
many people stay
quote! Love
stuck
it.
in there. So many people stay stuck in the struggle and the pain, and they're just like that's who they are now, and it's weird for them to not be in a state of chaos.
Hmm.
Because it takes work and it hurts to resolve some of those things, but then you also just have to develop the resolve to push through that and not stay there, right?
So you can realize that
Being I
attraction that you were talking about earlier.
yeah, I use the
Being
analogy
pulled
that
to that magnet that you're talking about, which is your purpose and your strength.
in the book I use an analogy of being a buffalo instead of a cow. Because I grew up working cattle on a cattle ranch, and cows run away from everything, especially storms. Like you get a rainstorm, lightning, blizzard, anything, they'll run the opposite direction. But bison, on the other hand, do the opposite. They run right through it. They
Hmm.
get through the storm faster. So I'm like,
You need to be a
resolve is also
bison.
kind of that attitude. Like you gotta freaking run into it, man, and
Run
and
into the
figure it out.
storm so you can face it.
Yep. So
Yeah,
once
that's
you've done
awesome.
enough of the discover and resolve, then you start to not only understand yourself better, but you start to clear up some of the things that are so noisy in your soul that are keeping you from hearing what your calling is.
Hmm.
So once you get to a point that you can actually see or hear the general direction that that trumpet's calling you from, because you're not going to know exactly where it is. Like
Hmm.
nobody knows exactly where it is, but you get to a point where you're like, I'm feeling pulled for reasons I can't explain really, but this is the direction I need to go. And that's the trumpet that's calling you. And you'll never feel that if you have all of this other stuff in the way first. So that you got to start working on that. You don't have to do it perfectly, but you got to start. Then once you actually get to a point that you can see or hear that it's calling to you from whatever direction that is, then at that point, it's time to invest in yourself as heavily as you can in that direction. Understanding that it's not going to be perfect,
That's
but as
the
long as it's in that
invest.
direction, you'll make progress and the clarity comes through the movement towards that direction, right?
Hmm.
But if you haven't cleared up the stuff and discover and resolve first and you go to invest in yourself in some way, you might be going completely the wrong way from
Right,
what is
because you're
actually
investing
calling
in the
to you.
wrong direction is what you're doing.
And then you
That's
got
why
to,
those have to
undo
be
all that stuff.
clear to move to the invest part that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to there is a way that you can get just barely enough clarity to see which direction you need to go, but you'll never have more than that.
Uh-huh.
Now, now that you're investing in yourself, you're starting to move in that direction. The visualized part is where I bring back a lot of the magnetic metaphors. And I talk about law of perpetual transmutation and law of vibration, which
Hmm.
is just how energy is transferred in our universe. And this might sound like kind of hippie BS. Like I thought this guy was Christian, but
It's okay.
really what I
This is really cool.
learned from the
And it's universal, by the
studying.
way. This stuff is applicable to anyone. You don't have to be a
Yeah, you
Christian
don't
to.
have to be a Christian for this to work.
No, this
You
stuff
don't.
is amazing. So
Um, in
anyone can
studying
benefit from this.
specifically thermodynamics. I had to
Uh-huh.
study thermodynamics in HVAC school because that's really what an HVAC technician is just a heat transfer scientist. We're trapping heat energy that's stuck in your house where we don't want it. We're packaging it up into refrigerant. We're pumping it outside of your condenser and we're throwing it into the atmosphere out
I recruited
there. Right?
HVAC guys, so it's fun to hear you talk about this. Keep going.
Good. So anybody that it I mean, an HVAC technician is going to resonate with this really well because we know that heat energy is transferred through vibration at the molecular level.
Hmm.
Molecules that have more heat energy trapped in them are moving and vibrating at a higher frequency at a higher rate. But they bump into each other and heat energy is transferred, and that's how we transfer heat energy through different mediums. So I kind of bring back some of those metaphors in like this is how you can think about how you are going to draw to you the energy that you need to accomplish what you want to accomplish and how you
I'm going to
can
quote from your
actually
book. If there
go
is a
for it.
reality that you seek, you must keep yourself on a vibrational level and a frequency cohesive with the materials and people required for that reality to exist. That requires an act of faith, being the person that reality is for before it comes into form. By the way, this is so applicable to a book called Worthy by the CEO of It Cosmetics, and she talks about this very same concept. Oh my
Let
gosh,
me
it's
write
just
that
crazy
down.
that you hit on this too.
It's so powerful because
So
it
cool.
works. And I put this in when I started learning some of this, I put it to the test because I was like, this almost sounds too good to be true that you can just like make things
Her
happen
name is
to a certain
Jamie
degree.
Kern Lima, an absolutely incredible human being. But that's
I'm
a
gonna write that
story
down
for
for
another
you.
day. But man, you
What
just
was the name of the book?
it's called Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima, and she hits on this same thing in the spiritual level, just like you do. I mean, you're like you're on the same wavelength as her. So
Yeah,
anyway,
the
I
same
mentioned,
vibration, right?
yeah, keep
So
going. Don't interrupt you.
so when I get the visualized part, right? This is okay. If we're investing in ourselves in this direction, we now have a general idea of what we want, at least like that's further down that road. So how do we actually make that happen? And we put into effect all these universal laws that already work. The way you do that is visualizing that you're already there,
Right.
specifically with gratitude.
Hmm.
Gratitude is the catalyst to all of it.
Hmm.
So what I tell
The
these
universe
kids and
brings into your
or these
life
guys.
what you see and what you're grateful for, and where you're headed. So, and it's interesting because it is a spiritual thing to some degree, but within yourself, you have to kind of get yourself clarity and kind of see the end game where you want to be.
Mhm.
And this is why goal setting is so important. There's another book out there, and it's the Habits book, and I can't remember his name for the life of me all of a sudden. Um, I'll put the link down in the chat later, but um, Atomic Habits book,
Yeah.
and I can't remember his name all of a sudden.
I'm
Anyway,
like,
keep
I
going.
might have that book sitting here somewhere. I could tell.
Yeah.
Um, but the visualizing is really, and specifically what you're trying to look at. Not only are you like mentally, spiritually putting yourself where you want to be ahead of time, and I told you, like, you have to write it down in as much vivid detail that someone could paint a picture with almost 100% accuracy of what that looks like, just from the words that you write down, from the present tense as if you're already there, not from I wish or I want. Like, no, I have it. And you're writing that down and you're making that your reality. But then specifically, you're looking at, okay, once I have made it there, I'm going to be a different version of myself than I am right now.
Hmm.
So, how do I think once I'm there? How am I going to think differently? How am I going to believe differently? How am I going to act differently? And you try to figure, like, what does this leveled up version of myself look like?
Hmm.
And you try to really look inside yourself and figure that out. And then once you figure out what some of those things are, consciously make that who you are right now. So then you can actually sustain the reality that you're trying to build. So then it can actually come. Because if you're not that version of you, then it can't come. Just like drew the magnetic field, right? What happens if you put magnets backwards to each other?
They
Like,
repel.
they don't freaking work, right?
Hmm.
They're not in harmony with each other. They don't work. They got to be in alignment. If you're not in alignment with the reality that you're trying to build, in alignment with your goals, you literally repel those things and draw to you the opposite of those things. And we've all met people like that just seem like their life is constantly falling apart and they're always complaining and just like stuff
Hmm.
never goes right, you know,
Right. It's because they
ever.
don't have the clarity. They haven't gone through these first four
And that's
steps.
not to say like if they just make this mental shift, everything's going to be fine. Like
Well,
it's
this is a
that's not
series
how
of
it works.
events
But
that someone has to go through in order to get clarity, then to move forward is really what it is.
yeah.
Uh,
So visualize is
it's a
powerful. That's how
powerful,
you
powerful
make your
thing.
investments work, right?
And that's
The
why
next
having
level.
quiet time and writing stuff down is so important. And doing this
Mhm,
on an occasional basis, maybe like even a monthly basis, have quiet time, go sit down, get your clarity, recenter. I do
mhm.
this for myself, and then I get my goals clear. I'm like, okay, this, and this, and then I'm like, okay, what's keeping me? So it's kind of like a mental inventory. We'll keep going. I
Yeah.
didn't interrupt you, but yeah,
Oh, you're good. That's perfect because I mean, everybody. I mean, there's been versions of this for a long time, like vision boards. You know, I've
yes,
heard of vision boards my whole
hmm,
life. That's basically what like seeing where you're gonna and pretending that you're there. You know,
yep.
it's kind of the same concept. There's manifesting it. There's so many different terms that people use for
No, it's
essentially the same
powerful
thing.
stuff, man. But talk about elevate. What's that?
So elevate is to me the catalyst to make the entire drive thing work as effectively and quickly as possible. Because again, I'm a very spiritual guy. I believe that God is very invested in our well-being, both physically, temporally, like worldly, and also our spiritual well-being. He wants us to be happy, but he's also given us free will, right?
Hmm.
Like he's not going to force anything upon us that we are not willing to receive. So if our success, if this reality that we're trying to build
Hmm.
also helps him to help his other children, then he's going to be on your team for that. Like if his purpose is fulfilled by you fulfilling that purpose, then that's just like exponential right there. You know, multiplied purpose right there. So I talk in the book like not only do we have to elevate ourselves, like elevate the way that we think, elevate the way that we believe, elevate even I even talk about elevating your environment because your immediate environment, like where you live and where you work, if that's just a constant, just a mess, then
Hmm.
that's like a direct reflection of what your mind is doing.
Hmm.
You know, like elevate your environment, make that a nice, like feels good place. So then you can actually have good, feel good stuff in your head, right? But then I talk about, well, we need to elevate as many people along the path of our own growth as possible
Yep.
because those that believe that there's just this pie and we're all fighting over our piece of the pie. It's a scarcity mindset, and I don't believe in that. I believe in more of a mindset of abundance where God has pretty much unlimited resources to help us get the things that we want in life, but we have to follow some particular, I guess you could say, patterns, or there's some things that we need to do to be able to accomplish that.
Hmm.
But if in the process of us doing that helps him to do the same with other people, then like things snowball. Like it's
That's
amazing.
awesome.
The amount of progress that I've made on just all of this. Like I started actually writing the book, I believe end of February is
Hmm.
when I began sitting down to write it. And it just launched, on the 5th, so like a week ago.
And isn't it fun when you start writing, it just starts to come to you, like all that. I mean, it's just kind of, well, I mean, if you just sit down, you start writing, it just starts to flow. Have you ever seen that?
Well,
It's kind
yeah,
of
it
an
was.
amazing
So
thing
what
how
I
that
did
works.
first was I came up with like, what do I want my book to look like? I came up with the chapters first,
Yeah.
and then I came up with the sub chapters after that, and then I came up with, okay, how am I going to break down each of these sub chapters? What are my little, topics inside of these
You've
sub
done a good
chapters?
job. I mean, well, we're at time, but I want to just really recommend this. Please, folks, get this. Give him some love. Find him on his, what's your socials?
Pretty much all my socials are going to be at Weston Brandon Speaker. On
Okay.
Facebook, it's just Weston Brandon. LinkedIn is just Weston Brandon. Um,
Well, give him
yeah.
some love and buy his book. I highly recommend it. And your book is very much tied to the leadership principles that John C. Maxwell teaches, the famous leadership guru.
Hmm.
Um, and self help is an amazing thing, and I'm just so excited for you. And I think you're gonna do some amazing things in the coming months. And your speaking engagements and whatever you find yourself doing, hire this man for a motivational speaker, you guys. He's
That was
incredible and he's fun to listen to, and he's got some really good ideas. He's using his HVAC, ideas, and some of the amazing things that he's put together. And what a courageous story of overcoming the challenge, losing your wife and having to be a single dad for a young baby. Oh, wow. That's about as an amazing story as you're going to find in this world.
Luckily I wasn't a single dad for very long. It was a few months at the most.
Well, still, but you had to pick
And
yourself
then
up. You had to
just
you had to use that drive pattern to literally pick yourself up and go forward, which is, I mean, that's really, when I call my channel "Where's Your Next," that's exactly what this is.
Mhm.
This is the very essence of the spirit of "Where's Your Next," which is you're looking forward into your life, you're going forward, you're figuring it out, you take control of your life, you own your life. um, and that's really what this is all about. And so, thanks for coming on. This was fun. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
I learned more about you, and I'm just really excited to delve into myself. I mean, I barely started reading it, so I'm looking forward to getting into this and learning something. So,
Sweet. There's a podcast episode that just launched that's it's the first one where I've gone in detail about a lot of that story about what happened, and then also into a lot more detail of my book. The podcast is called the 1090 podcast, and in my speaking engagements, and we're currently putting together a fairly large coaching package for high level guys that have the rug pulled out from under them and need to overhaul everything as quickly as possible. And a lot of what I'm planning to do with profits from that is donating a significant portion of those to a nonprofit that Mason Sawyer just started. It was actually a goal of mine that I had wanted to do for a long time, is start a nonprofit for helping cover expenses for families that lose a loved one. And then he just went
mm,
and did it, and I was like, well, all right, I'm just gonna partner with you on this
so
eventually,
you're doing
or
some
just
good
donate to
stuff.
this. Yeah,
How
so
how much of your
I
profit
would
you donating?
probably 10%, like minimum,
That's pretty
and because
remarkable. That is so
most of it
cool.
we're trying to roll into some other programs, but probably 10% we're going to be donating to that. And yeah, if you
Did
want
you
me to
see
come speak,
yourself
I
on this
live
path?
for that.
Did you see
What?
yourself on this path
Oh
doing
no,
all
like I
this?
said, in December this wasn't even a thought. Had
And
no
here
idea I
you
was
are.
going to do this, and here
And
I
here it
am.
is.
Yep.
It's happening. Well,
Yeah.
to
So
my
my
audience of
email,
16,000,
when
you
are you up right at an hour?
we're there, but we can still talk for a little bit.
Okay. I was just
I
say my email address is if people want to have me come speak, like that's what I'm living for right now. That's what I'm trying to push. I'm
Go for it.
trying to get that out as
Put
much
it
as I
out there,
can.
man. Tell us.
So yeah, my email is info at westonbrandon.com. You shoot me an email there and we can work something out. I've just started doing some around, had a really cool one with our big regional young men's group, for the youth in our church. And that was cool. I tell you what,
And what I heard was that was one of the most inspiring talks that many people have heard in their entire lives.
wow. See, that's cool feedback. But
Hmm.
when I went there, I I prayed before we went out there, and I was like, it just helped. Just one of these boys needs something, hopefully more, but one of them, like, help me change one. Help me be the conduit for God to change one boy's life. And there was a bunch that ended up going out by themselves and kneeling down and praying, having some just fantastic experiences. But one of them got up after that and grabbed the microphone and said that he had been struggling with some feelings of feeling like it wasn't worth it to keep going, those kinds of thoughts, and the self-harm or the sewer slide kind of thoughts. And he got up there and he says, when Weston told us to go out and kneel down and just take some quiet time to ourselves and finally allow God to talk to us, he's like, that's what I asked him, was like, is there even a purpose to, like, why am I even freaking here? And he said that's the first time he'd ever felt God talk to him. And
Oh,
he's like,
so good.
he's like, at the moment, I'm not having any more of those thoughts. And it's been a long time since that's happened. So then at that point, I'm like bawling over here on the side that I'm like, there's the one. That was the
Oh
one,
well.
Did we just save a
And
kid's life?
I mean, this story is going to help a ton of people. And give this man some love. Thanks for coming on. It was a lot of fun. From Where's Your Next to you. Thanks for listening, Mike and
Thanks, Mike.
Weston